Hey all, Liana here with a special video. I'm putting this up earlier than usual, I think, because this is an alternative look at the concept of women as reward. And of course, it's the latest tropes versus women in video games video. Now, before we start, please excuse the rough quality of this video. I got it done fast because I want to try to soothe things as much as I could, as quickly as I could. You can see sort of all these things have already done reaction videos. People are upset. So I wanted to try to do it, and I've prepared notes. Like, it's not going to be as free form as usual. This is going to be more essay like the things I usually do about this particular YouTube channel. Now, why did I decide to do this? I believe the timing of this video, as close as it is to the release of Metal Gear Solid 5, is provocative. It's unduly inflammatory. It's going to upset people if it hasn't already. So in the interest of keeping things calmer, I'm mounting a defense of these games, and by extension gamers, because this video I think could be seen as a deliberate attack. And the focus on Metal Gear Solid highlights one of the most major things to me wrong with the tropes versus women hypothesis. I don't talk about games. I don't play from beginning to end, inside and out. I want to really understand them. I don't play Metal Gear because I personally find it uncomfortable. There's themes of PTSD linked to sexuality I find personally disturbing, so I don't play these games. I'm not prepared, though, to say that using Playboy magazines as bait for enemies is something that's going to harm men's opinion of women. I'm not going to comment further than that because I can't bring myself to play these games, and those reasons are totally personal. That's not the fault of the games. Okay, so I'm not going to be dealing anymore with Metal Gear. Sorry if that bothers people. This is just this that I won't comment on games I haven't played, and this is when I haven't played, and those are my reasons. So, moving forward. And there's the Playboy. This is what we're getting really upset about. Okay, so how do tropes versus women define women as reward? My lovely screenshot I took and uploaded to Google Drive for this purpose. Okay, women as reward. When women, or more often women's bodies, are employed as rewards for character actions in video games, the trope frames female bodies as collectible, as tractable, or as consumable, and positions women as status symbols designed to validate the masculinity of presumed straight male players. I think presumed straight male players should become a drinking game. What the video really deals with is something a little different. It deals with a collection of tropes, ranging from depictions of the sex trade, a favorite Sarkeesian punching bag, imported tropes from movies, car racing, and professional sports. Then there's the use of intimate images within committed relationships, and then there's the chivalric tradition. And I'd like to spend some time on chivalry before we go further. Chivalry, as you can see in the painting, is a complex tradition derived from warrior codes for mounted knights. Roman military traditions merged with Christianity and a bunch of other stuff to form a code of conduct that, among other things, told knights they couldn't do anything and everything they wanted to with the women they encountered. Ladies' affections and kisses on the cheek that Sarkeesian takes such issue with, like this cute little stuff here, isn't that cute? You know, when viewed through the chivalric tradition, is assumed to be consensual. This is driven by a deep bond between lady and knight or plumber. And most importantly, chaste. It's in direct opposition to the male entitlement that Sarkeesian claims in the Tropes versus Women video. Instead, it's the idea that a man must earn a lady's affection, and that will take as long and require as much effort and require defeating Bowser as many times as the woman determines is appropriate. Keep in mind, the two most familiar archetypes of chivalry, Lancelot and this guy Tristan, are hopelessly in love with women they cannot hope to have for themselves because they're married to their kings. You see the composition here. He's got the harp, which is symbolic in romantic art, but he's looking at her, she's looking away, and there's the king. And you could study just this image forever to see all the subtext in it. But this is the tradition that all these rescue the princess and win her affection comes from. Are women given a lot of social status or power at the time of chivalry? No. Was it a step in the right direction? Yes. Does it still have potentially positive ramifications today? Yes, absolutely. So, whether it's Mario rescuing Princess Peach or the Ninja Turtles rescuing April O'Neil, and I love this picture, chivalry is tied to the idea that these women are worth saving because they have some inherent symbolic value, not because the guy who saves them is going to get to play hide the salami with them. And the sexual subtext between April O'Neil and the Ninja Turtles is Teenage Mutant furry territory, okay? Not that there's anything wrong with that. I love you, furries. Hi, furries. I love you. Here's a picture of me as Chitara for the furries. We all cool? Okay, good. So, this kiss on the cheek. Yeah, it's significant that Peach kisses Mario on the cheek and he just looks like he won the lottery. It's a chaste gesture, as I was saying before. It's not going further than that except in fan art. Sex isn't the motivator in these scenarios. It's the woman's good opinion, not sex, that drives these idealized heroes. So they don't fit the trope of woman as reward because it's not the bodies that are the currency, so to speak. And I'll go back to this. Women, or more often women's bodies, are employed as rewards. Another easy false positive to skim off here is the references to sex workers that seem to always offend Anita Sarkeesian. So, yes, there are sex workers, including in the Witcher games. He's a character model of one. Yes, Geralt can sleep with them, but in a video game, just because you can do something doesn't mean you have to. And The Witcher's status as an RPG is relevant to that. The footage shown from The Witcher 3 also reminded people who have actually played the game, and I tried to find that for you guys, but I cannot go back and watch this boring video again, so you're going to have to take my word for it, that it costs 40 orens for sex with a prostitute, and it's 4 lousy experience points in the clip they show. If you really want porn, that's your bag, but I think the insultingly low XP payout for these sort of transactions for gamers are more of a deterrent than no XP rewarded at all. If titties are that important to you, go ahead and have your titties. But the game is essentially telling you that you're not thinking strategically. This is a big evolution for the Witcher franchise from the days of these conquest cards, as pretty as these cards are. And I think the franchise should be praised for its arc towards maturation. Instead, Tropes vs. Women presents both the first game and the third game side by side, making the 2015 incarnation of The Witcher seem a lot worse regarding the portrayal of women than it really is. But this is a specific example of sex workers in video games, not the concept of sex workers in video games itself. Engaging the services of a prostitute in a video game and in the real world is not getting a hooker as a reward any more than hiring a plumber to fix your toilet is a reward. It's a business transaction. And if we really are advocates of women's rights, we should support women in the sex trade's right to self-define as providers of a sexual service. A hooker sticking her finger in your ass is as much of a job as a proctologist doing it. This understanding is important to getting to a place where prostitutes, porn stars, and erotic models can practice their trades in safe, non-exploitative settings. It's the stigma behind sex work, not the work itself, that causes such social harm. And feminist frequency contributes to this every freaking time they make a video. Now, I'm not saying you can't personally oppose porn or prostitution. That's your personal choice. The point I'm making is when looked at as part of history or as part of the complex social systems that make up the world, sleeping with a prostitute isn't a reward for good behavior. In video games, it's often a game mechanic, which isn't the same as a different midpoint or ending that you get based on how well you play. Can mechanics reward players? Sure, of course. But it's not quite the same thing. And let's use that as a segue into feminist frequency attacking one of the strongest female characters in video games, Samus Aran. Anita herself seems so cautious off the top of this, I'm not even sure she wanted to do this. It's Not enough anymore for a woman to star in her own game. No. It's not enough that gamers formed a bond with Samus before finding out she was female. No. Samus Aran still fails the feminist frequency test because she takes her clothes off to varying degrees depending on how fast the player completes the game. Let's examine that, but not as a task reward system. Let's examine it as a relationship, okay? When you first meet Samus, you don't know her very well. You don't work especially well together, and it takes a fairly long time to get through the game the first time. So she doesn't let you see who she really is at the end. Second playthrough, though, you do better. Maybe you get to see her face this time. Maybe even a bodysuit. But you likely didn't see her in her underwear until the third date, did you? And by that point, you've worked together as a team for hours. You've probably seen her as way more than a pair of boobs. The game doesn't let you see Samus as a woman until you've proven respect for her as a warrior. And what's wrong with that? Seeing a woman in her underwear after spending hours fighting at her side, this is bad? Okay, yeah, we often aren't rewarded with bare-ass boys in games outside of BioWare, but that's changing, thanks to BioWare. So, there's reason to keep an eye on the overuse of this save the princess thing, but more because it's done to death now, not because it's harmful. So, staying on this relationship thing, there were some comments made about nude photos a game character had of his girlfriend. And similarly, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with having sexual thoughts about a woman you're in a committed relationship with? Isn't that healthy? Now, regarding those trophy girls, the cuties at the finish line, the ring girls, etc., gaming didn't invent these. They're put in games to deal with these subcultures because they're a part of that subculture. Whether we agree with the morals of NASCAR or boxing or whatever you have you, when a developer's trying to simulate a real-world culture, they're going to portray those cultures. Blaming a video game for a trope it borrowed from elsewhere is showing a lack of understanding of medium, especially considering that many of those early video games were using pre-existing tropes to explain gameplay mechanics that, at the time, were fairly foreign to people. So now that we've dealt with a few examples of narrative content that can be looked at through other lenses, I want to spend some time on an idea that in-game achievements for acting like a pervert actually encourage that behavior. I don't agree with that based on my own experiences. The first time I completed a BioWare romance arc, a little icon popped up on the bottom of my PC screen with a heart customized to the character I'd just spent a hot night with. It felt akin to my buddy walking in on me right after sex. Thanks, Steam. You just shared a private romantic moment with the entire freaking internet. But at least I felt something for Alistair, and then Liliana, and then Zevran, and then Alistair again. I play Dragon Age Origins a lot, okay? If I noticed a friend got an achievement for prolonged attempts to look up the skirt of the protagonist of Lollipop Chainsaw, I would mercilessly make fun of them because I'm that kind of asshole. And I'm not alone in this form of being an asshole. So in circles like mine, those sorts of achievements aren't encouragement. They're deterrents. Okay, if a person got that achievement just to max their gamer score, that's different. But that's not encouraging sexualized and objectifying behavior either. They're indifferent to the practice if they just want that perfect gamer score. They just want the points. In both these scenarios, like attracts like in terms of the people who play together. And isn't it great that there are obvious warnings in people's gaming profiles that they might be raging perverts? It makes it easier to avoid scumbags. The last thing I want to touch on is the use of unlockable costumes. Feminist Frequency claims that unlockable cosplay extras encourage some sort of trophy status for female playable characters. I think this shows their ignorance of cosplay culture more than any sort of feminist analysis, because the cosplay community that these alternate outfits are inspired by enforces very strict look but don't touch policies. Cosplay fans are the furthest thing from masculine entitlement you'll ever find. And to compare the sexier Resident Evil costumes to the lollygoth stuff of American McGee's Alice, it's apples and oranges. One's designed to accentuate secondary sex characteristics. The other's deliberately childlike. Don't get me wrong, I love American McGee's Alice. The designs are great. But it's not alternate costumes done right as opposed to Resident Evil doing it wrong. The hemline on this dress is not much different than the hemline here. It's the body type of the model and then the context of the costume. It's not better or worse. It's just different. I'd say a better contextual example of alternative costumes done right is the alternative look for Ciri in the DLC of The Witcher. What? Yes! I'm holding The Witcher up as a positive example of something. Why? Because it solved my main complaint about Ciri's original outfit, in that her loose-fitting top with an open front would serve as a parachute during her sort of iconic dash attacks. Yeah, this outfit's still a bit silly with the exposed skin and things like that, but I prefer it. And so I changed it. And that's the whole point of alternative outfits. Player preference, not external moral judgments. Some alternate costumes will be sexier, some won't be. But the point is, no one is making players change them. And that's the real question behind whether a trope is versus women, isn't it? Does it cultivate harmful attitudes in a player? In the case of women as reward, it all comes down to how you interpret consent in these scenarios. Feminist frequency insists that the women involved in these games don't have a choice whether or not to fling themselves at the male hero. I maintain this ruins the entire reward concept. The reward isn't that the woman is forced to sleep with your fictional self. The reward is that they think you're so awesome, heroic, virtuous, and probably good smelling that they very much want to kiss you, hug you, sleep with you, whatever the scenario is. The idea is that you're earning an amazing woman's affection throughout the game, not some rite of prima nocta. If a guy wants to spend his leisure time fantasizing about doing amazing things to impress an amazing woman, that's amazing by me. Good on you, guys. Sure, a guy may hope he'll get laid, but that's a far cry from expecting it. Now, there are games that don't exist on a romantic paradigm, like Grand Theft Auto and other crime games. And these games are controversial, and they're very much more of a gray area. But crime games are only one portion of a very large video game industry. What happens in these games can't be seen to represent all games. And sure, many games, especially Japanese games, have moments of fan servicey fixations on women's bodies. What we have to determine is if a juvenile approach to women and women's bodies translates into a feeling that men are somehow entitled to those bodies. And I think most red-blooded heterosexual dudes know this just isn't so. What the latest Tropes versus Women video fails to recognize is that the presumably straight male audience for these games can't be presumed to be high-status males. The fundamental flaw in logic is the assumption that men take the message that the idealized woman in video games is accessible to men like them. And this is obviously a joke, guys. Please don't get mad at me. The point is that many games are made for the type of guy who can barely talk to a woman. Any woman. These aren't scenarios the target audience ever expects, never mind feels entitled to replicate. If you want to say that, too many video games put hypergendered characters on pedestals and neglect the noble, equally valuable accomplishments of every man and every woman, I'm right there with you. But feminist frequency's conclusion that video games like The Witcher and God of War encourage male entitlement misses the point that the anger in the video games community right now is driven by a related but very different fact. Gamers, in large numbers, feel like the world doesn't give a shit about them because they're not guys like Kratos or Geralt of Rivia or Hot Ryu. They feel just as inadequate when women around them squeal over Thor, this guy, as we ladies do when guys are going on about Tifa Lockhart's boobs. Okay, I don't feel inadequate about Tifa's boobs. I feel inadequate because of her legs. But then I tell myself I have other skills and other things that other people will value. I don't have to compete physically or through wardrobe or through behaviors because there are plenty of men and women who value me and find me attractive for me. The frequency of my feminism is to broaden the concept of beauty to include all body types and all preferences and get rid of this concept of normal completely. If I want to dress in a certain way, I'm going to do it because that's how I'm feeling at the time. I don't do it for straight men, gay women, or anyone else. I do it for me. And if you like that, great. If you don't, head over to 8chan. There are plenty of people there who think I'm ugly too. The point is, they're entitled to that opinion. because that opinion is irrelevant. I'm fine if another woman is valued for her beauty, as long as I live in a world where I can be equally but differently valued for my mind. As long as I'm able to earn a living, I don't care how many idiots attack me, slander me, or send stupid, impotent threats about silencing me, destroying me, putting my head on a pike, or what they're gonna do to my cunt. It only bothers me when editors, producers, executives, and other gatekeepers want to start muzzling me or dumbing me down because they're afraid of the mob. It only bothers me when advertisers drop an industry I love because they mouth the lip service of social justice, but won't put their money anywhere that it might actually matter. It bothers me when internet harassment is used as a red herring to shame and stigmatize gamers in the mainstream, driving away the next generation of visionaries who may be male or female, but especially those young women who may now think gaming hates them because of the stuff they're hearing from services like Feminist Frequency. I'm here to tell you guys, I am you. I once thought this industry didn't want me either. And you know who proved that wrong? Thousands of gamers who said, please keep going, we need your voice. In the past year, I decided to pull a Samus and take off my helmet, gradually remove my power armor, and show the world that I am a gamer, and I am a woman, and fuck you if you don't like any part of that equation. The fact that I'm a gamer is equally relevant to my gender, and I denounce the cowardice and the laziness of the mainstream press, which took a couple of anecdotes of hate and misery as the norm, instead of gross, savage anomalies in a giant, thriving, innovative industry that has let me do and say things that I never would have been allowed in television or radio. That perspective, that knowledge, that I know it's worse in the newsrooms and boardrooms that are demonizing gaming than it is in gaming itself, that knowledge drives me to keep talking, keep yelling, keep swearing if I have to. I'm a woman, yeah, but I'm a gamer. And in the past year, other gamers have been a damn sight kinder to me as a fellow gamer than the so-called feminists in gaming have been to me as a fellow woman. The right for me to speak that truth is the frequency of my feminism. The drive for me to be valued for my preferences and opinions more than be protected from online hordes because of my gender, that is the frequency of my feminism. The reminders I get, not just from women, but from male gamers with daughters that there's work to do that they can't do and I can, that is the frequency of my feminism. Do silly fantasies about women in male-dominated fields potentially undermine real female cops, firefighters, and soldiers at work? Sure. But that's a real-world problem, not a gaming problem. Is human trafficking a serious problem that forces women into sexual slavery? Yeah, but that's a real-world problem, not a gaming problem. Are women woefully underrepresented in leadership positions for reasons that are complete bullshit? Yeah, but that's a real-world problem, not a gaming problem. You know why the mainstream press probably spends so much time shitting on gamers? Because it's hard for anyone to face that they're a part of the problem. Gaming historically has copied trends in other media. So, like hip-hop music before us, if you don't like what you're seeing coming out of games, you're actually sneering at your own reflection. If we keep deflecting the problem, we'll never solve the problem. And those within gaming who think it's prudent to bow to mainstream condemnations, you're making it worse. By agreeing that gaming is as bad as everyone says it is, you're attracting every bigoted asshole who feels the world has done him wrong to video games, making them think that this is some sort of white nationalist, misogynist promised land. It's not. 2 of the 3 major console companies are Japanese. Do we have work to do in the gaming industry? Hell yes. But we're going to do that work because it's right, not because we're bullied into it by mainstream shame. The oppressive political correctness isn't actually making things better. It's just covering up the fact that the mainstream media is still strangely terrified by the inherent power of a woman's breasts because they can actually be used to sell products. The problem inherent here is we treat the actual beautiful women who are some of our culture's greatest salespeople like crap. We treat sex workers, who are some of the greatest psychologists on the planet, like crap. And we treat women who don't want to have to choose between attainable beauty, sexuality, and being a thinking, opinionated person like crap. We're still forcing women far more than men into pigeonholes, then wondering why we don't see female CEOs, directors, and entrepreneurs in the numbers we'd like. That is not the frequency of my feminism. Video games deserve better women's advocacy than a video series that rips apart gaming's most beloved female heroes one by one. We're just pinning a scarlet letter on Princess Peach and Samus and Lara Croft every time one of these things hits YouTube. At this point, I can't see these systemic attacks on the first ladies of gaming as anything but cynical. Gaming needs to move past this phase of periodic shaming of characters created decades ago because other entertainment products from the same eras had less dynamic female characters than gaming did. The most popular TV show in 1987, the year Metroid came out in North America, was Full House. Yeah, that show did great things for women. Right now, we're mostly in agreement that gaming is at war. Advertisers are fleeing to safer ground, like political programming, and people are fed up with the anger. Perhaps Tropes vs. Women did good at one point, but at this point, its recycling concept is over a year late on delivery on stretch goals, and Anita is looking more like a person reading a letter in a hostage video than a confident advocate for women. More at this point is just more. How many of gaming's leading ladies have to take a public flogging before we say enough is enough? Yeah, there are 5 more videos promised? I don't know about the rest of you, but I can't take another 18 months of this. It's at the point where Tropes versus Women might be causing more harm to women working in video games than the games themselves. It's encouraged a deeply negative dialogue by not respecting the love people have for these characters and stories. Saying, it's okay to like these games isn't enough. Anita and friends aren't showing nearly enough sensitivity to the fact that gamers feel far more strongly about these games than just like. For many, these games, characters, and pernicious narratives kept them going when they otherwise would have given up. And stomping on them over and over is the equivalent to gamers of burning the flag or calling their kid ugly. These things are offensive and rude, and you can predict that it's going to piss people off. Those who want to be thought leaders in video games should first respect video games and the love gamers have for them. That's not terribly much to ask. Is there really a difference at this point between what Sarkeesian is doing by hollering out her police-escorted car window at gamers every few months and the street harassment she so passionately speaks out against? Bold statement, I know, but from where I sit, not really. Both actions are rooted in insecurity and an attempt to verbally dominate an other. Both don't cause any real physical harm, but they do leave emotional scars. And it's time for both to stop.